Hey, folks. Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. I imagine for some people it's tomorrow somehow. I don't know. For Andrew, it's probably tomorrow somehow. But welcome to these fun little live streams we get to do every few weeks. I try to make content for about 3 weeks in a row, and then come back and do a live stream to kind of, I don't know, wrap things up or take some questions and things like that. So it's really great to be able to to get all of this in. But yeah, it's been a great few weeks here on the channel getting stuff done. I mean, I just feel like I've been insanely busy since getting the last one of these up. I think we covered the Pistis Sophia, which is just it's like beast mode Gnosticism. It's just the most complicated text that I think I've ever had to handle, and I still don't know how much of a sense that I have a firm grasp on that material. But um, Evans left a comment on the episode, and she seems to think that the episode was good, and she's basically one of the leading authorities, maybe one of the only leading authorities in Pistis Sophia and the books of you. And so if I get her nod of approval, then I was happy to get that. So I think that it was a pretty good episode. It really was a lot of fun to make because it really did allow me to get into a text that is extremely difficult and that I'm very intimidated by. I think many people are extremely intimidated by it. So much so that I think I mentioned this in the episode that I talked to David Litwa, and I was like, "Hey, why is there not more secondary literature on Pistis Sophia?" And Litwa basically admitted to the fact that most experts in the field of Gnosticism are pretty intimidated by the Pistis Sophia, and they just don't do it. So I was glad to kind of knock it out and at least take a stab at it and get some of it out there. But yeah, we've covered a lot of stuff. Got to cover the episode on Nicholas Emmerich and Emmerich's attempt by the Inquisition to demonize alchemy, which again, that whole time period, it's really an important time period. The period of John the 22nd, Pope John the 22nd, and Nicholas Emmerich. That period is really decisively important in the history of alchemy because that's the period after which alchemy begins using highly Christianized language, and also it's when you really begin to see the rise in things like Decknamen and extremely floral, alliterative or not alliterative, allegorical language that we now so associate alchemy with. That prior to John the 22nd, alchemy just didn't write like that. At least not they didn't write as much like that. But after John the 22nd, you really have a shift in a great deal more obscurity in European alchemical literature. And in many ways, I think that uptick in the interest by the church and by someone like Nicholas Emmerich, who you don't want to have, of all the people in the world that you don't want to have their attention, Nicholas Emmerich is absolutely one of those people. So so that's an interesting moment, and it was fun to cover that text, which has just recently gotten published. It only exists in two manuscripts, one in, I think, Barcelona, one in Paris, I believe, but it only exists in two manuscripts, and it just recently got an edition. So that was really lucky to be able to do that. It was really a lot of fun to get that done. So so yeah, I mean, what else we covered last week? Oh, some Kabbalah stuff. Yeah, we talked about this great period of time before Tzimtzum, right? So this period before Tzimtzum, in which Israel Sarug was able to extract some stuff from the Ramak, who is my favorite Kabbalist of all time, without any doubt, and be able to use some of that material from the Ramak, specifically the concept of the Shashua, the eternal delight of the Godhead, and then to use some of that material in such a way as to show that before the Tzimtzum, which should be unknowable, there should be a period of absolute unknowability for before Tzimtzum, and that the divine delight occurred prior to that, and also not only did it occur prior to that, but it precipitated the act of Tzimtzum. So that to me is just really interesting. It's just, again, like there's a lot of material on the internet about Kabbalah, A lot of material on YouTube about Kabbalah, most of it bad. But I don't know. I think that we've heard the standard Lurianic story repeated over and over and over and over again. And I think that what we don't really hear about that Lurianic story is that there were huge debates about the nature of Tzimtzum, how we should understand Tzimtzum, the whole controversy um, over Tzimtzum Kavushto, literal Tzimtzum. So all of these debates are really, really fascinating. And what that precipitated actually was I got a lot of questions, and I always get a lot of questions when I do an episode on Kabbalah about how to actually learn Kabbalah, traditional Kabbalah, not the sort of third hand made up stuff that you see in so many occult bookstores. And some of the stuff that passes as classics. I mean, I think of Dion Fortune's book on Kabbalah is terrible. It's just bad. And that book gets recommended to people all the time. I see it on the occult subreddit where people are like, I want to learn about Kabbalah. They recommend that book. It's just bad. It's just it's a not good book about Kabbalah. And so it really prompted me to think a good bit. And I was thinking with Zevi about this, about sort of what would be the book I could put in everyone's hand if they really wanted to study Kabbalah from a historically authentic traditional source. And that's what the episode is today. I normally don't do an episode on my weeks where I do live streams, but I've gotten this question so much that I thought, I need to just set down and answer for it as best I can. And the answer that I came up with, and I think it's a pretty good answer, is the Shomer Munim, which is a fantastic text in that edition that I recommended, the Frankel edition, because it's great. It has the Hebrew and it has an English translation, which is very reliable. It's also the last Kabbalistic book that really united everyone. That is to say, after the fiasco of Shabbatai Tzvi, when everyone was sort of getting their wits about them, the rabbis kind of came together and were like, what do we agree on? What is the actual authentic Kabbalah that's not infected with this Shabbatian nonsense? And what ultimately emerged was that they all agreed that the Shomer Monim was really the best hedge against against that. And so it's a text that enjoys, I think, unparalleled status. That insofar as it is read by Sfardim, Ashkenazim, it's read by Hasidic people, it's read by Misnagdim, the opponents of the Hasidic movement, and so the fact that it has so much universal appeal, and that it existed, it came into print in the 1720s before the eruption of the anti-Hasidic movement, and so it really represents a unifying text in that regard. And so in that way, I think the Shomer Monim is really the text that I'm really happy to recommend to people. And again, if you really want to learn traditional Kabbalah in an actual historically important, historically rigorous text that's still considered highly vetted by Kabbalists even down to this day, you should check out the episode that I dropped today on the Shomer Monim. And again, not that text doesn't have problems. I mean, it makes all kinds of claims about Kabbalah and Zohar that are historically false. It's written by a Kabbalist, so of course they're going to say things like Kabbalah goes back to Moses or something like that. But those claims are historically dubious at best. So your mileage may vary when it gets to claims like that. Excuse me. But the actual text of Shomer Monim and the introductory essay sort of going through Lurianic Kabbalah is quite solid. So that's the other thing we've been doing. Of course, the other, I guess, elephant in the room when it comes down to what we've been doing recently here on the channel is this Agrippa class. I've been really, really, really happy with how the Agrippa class has been going. I've had a blast putting it together. It's just been so much fun to put together a class on something that I really, really think is important and I really enjoy. And so, and it's really just a blessing to be able to hang out with such lovely people. The Patreon community gets access to the lectures live, and then we do Q&A afterwards, and we also have Alpha Hours that meet every Friday. It's one of the perks of being a Patreon supporter is that you get to have more direct access to the actual class, but also office hours and stuff like that. And just getting to know the folks in the class. I mean, I had office hours this morning, and just absolutely lovely, thoughtful, kind, profoundly smart folks. It's just amazing that I get to learn, to learn with such a great crew of people, and also that they're subsidizing the class in such a way that through, again, crowdfunding. This is just a weird experiment in like crowdfunded education, such that I can drop those lectures every Tuesday, I guess, for free. And what would otherwise be, I think, a relatively inaccessible class, either financially or for a lot of other reasons, that the fact that I can just make that completely free to anybody who can watch it on the phone or whatever really is. It really just shows you that we're just now beginning to get a sense of how to engage in truly accessible education of significant depth that can reach many, many, many people. And we don't have to think about education as, how do we paywall it? How do we protect it? How do we vet it or something? How do we, it's not this protectionist attitude about education, but for me, it's a radical commitment to accessibility, and having that ability to do what I love, which is teach, and be able to do that in a radical and under a radical commitment to accessibility that's underwritten by incredibly kind, incredibly smart people who support this work. It's just I don't know what the right word is. It's just flabbergasting. It's just so like amazing that I get to do this, and I can't really express in words how grateful I am, both for the community of people that support me, but also for the folks that learn with me and from me. So thank you all for that. So it's been a good class. Agrippa is a complicated character. I think as you've been following the lectures, you're definitely seeing that he's a more complex character than I think most people think of him as. And that we haven't even gotten yet to the 3 books of occult philosophy. We're really building up to that, and I really want to build up to that slowly, because I think that this is a text that we all think we know, or we've heard of, and we know is important. But what I'm trying to show throughout the course of this seminar is that it's often underappreciated just how important it is, and also underappreciated in just in terms of how complex it is. And so there's that. And not only we're talking about Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy, but we're also we're also looking at some other works of Agrippa that have not been translated. In fact, behind the scenes a little bit, there are some very early conversations being had between me and Dr. Dana Trell about the possibility of getting some of those published, getting some of Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy, his other hermetic and occult books, actually, or pamphlets rather, getting some of those published. No guarantees and no promises, none of that. But thinking about that, I really want to do that. I think that people would appreciate having access to that material. At any rate, if Dan and I can pull it off, maybe we will. But Dan's the man with the translation skills, and so I'd love to work with him on that kind of thing. We work together on it to some degree, but we'll see. It's really early conversations at this point. But again, I really. Agrippa's a character that's loomed large in my mind. He's a character that's loomed large in my education. And he's a character that I feel like, and I wonder if you guys feel the same way, I just don't feel like he's ever been given his day in the sun. John Dee gets every damn day in the sun. It's John Dee all day, every day in the occult world. Bruno also, right? The big statues to Bruno in Italy. The science people have claimed Bruno, and there's so much about Bruno that people have really gotten. Bruno's got his day in the sun in some ways, although I think he's not as read as widely and as deeply as he should be as well. But I feel like Agrippa has really been thrown under the bus, and I really want this seminar to be something incredibly as comprehensive as I can make it. A really comprehensive version of that. And yeah, I hope that this will be a testament to Agrippa, and it will be a worthy testament to Agrippa. But yeah, so that's really what's going on. And some people have asked me how long the Agrippa class will go. I don't know. I'm thinking probably somewhere between 10 and 15 seminars, like 10 and 15 lectures. That's my guess at this point. I'm thinking, yeah, probably between 10 and 15 lectures total. I don't know that I have it in me to do much more than that. But I think somewhere between 10 and 15 would be my guess based on what we've been going so far. But this weekend we'll turn to the esoteric aspects of Agrippa's, the influences on Agrippa, and then after that, I think we turn directly to his works. We're really going to start plowing through his major works, starting with the Declaration on the Preeminence of Women, which sometimes gets touted as a kind of proto-feminist work, which I don't think that's true at all. But it's interesting because some of the arguments that he gives for the preeminence of women are actually Hermetic and Kabbalistic arguments. So it's a text that ostensibly doesn't have anything to do with the occult philosophy, but as we'll see when we get under the hood of it a little bit, it in fact does. So, but yeah, we'll be turning to that, and yeah, to the 1510 juvenile draft and all that. So anyway, lots more Agrippa stuff to come. So be on the lookout for more Agrippa classes through the rest of the summer. Yeah, maybe we'll end sometime right at the door of spooky season, and that'll be a good place to wrap Agrippa, is right at the the door to spooky season, maybe September or something, early September. All right, folks. Let's do some Q&A. And see what kind of questions you guys have, and see if I have any ability to answer them. And I'll hang out for at least an hour or so. And yeah, let's do that. All right. You scroll up. Do you consider yourself to be secular? No. Do not consider myself to be secular. I'm not even. Yeah. The answer is no. Do you have any interest in doing an episode on the Philokalia? I don't really cover much Eastern stuff. My focus is definitely the West, the Latin West, and so probably not. Though again, it's just a weakness of mine. I don't have an education in that material. Not to say that it doesn't deserve that, just deserve the content. It's just not me to make it. Do you have an eye for spotting texts written by, for lack of a better term, zealots, or even things written by intelligent but insane authors? Do detailed writings exist like that? Insanity is sort of a culturally specific thing in so many ways. I throw a lot of shade at Foucault, but when the dude's right, he's right, and I think that in this case he's right. I think most people in history that wrote anything down were weird. I think that you have like books, at least like big texts, and not only that, but if not only writing things down but preserving things. I think that's a very, considering that literacy existed for 10% of the population, 5% of the population, it's already a tiny group of people. In that you would contribute writing something is just unusual. So I think that once already something is written down, it's already a bit strange. That's unusual statistically. And do I look at a text and think that, this was written by like a mentally ill person? I don't know. I don't do that. I'm not a I think that so much of whatever is quote unquote mental illness is like very culturally mediated, and that means also culturally mediated in time. And so what would be constitutive of mental illness now may have not been then, and what is then may not be now. Again, one person's so-called schizophrenia is another person's shaman. I think that there's a lot of range when it comes to that kind of stuff in time. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's something like Shabtai Tzvi. He was pretty clearly, I think most mental health professionals think of as someone like suffering from bipolar or manic depression. Seems to be a pretty standard diagnosis by people who can do that. Again, diagnosing people in the past is always a spurious business. But I don't know. I don't get in the business of trying to figure out who's sane or insane, because that probably will end up saying more about me and my cultural biases and my temporal biases than it will be about that author. So no, when I read Paul in the letters and saying he flew into heaven or met the resurrected Jesus, I take that at face value, or at least I take the text as saying that, and I don't have much of interest in like pathologizing Paul or anything like that. So, or anybody, it's not my business. Thanks, Ida. Thanks, I appreciate the super chat. I appreciate that. That's a good question, Ezra. What are the biggest challenges you face in providing this content and as an educator? The biggest challenges I think are just like any institution, right? Esoterica, whether I like it or not, is now kind of a functioning educational institution, and it's a functioning educational institution with a substantial audience, and I'm very thankful for that. But I think like every institution that does sort of education, the big barrier is just funding. It's just finding funding, getting funding, and keeping the lights on and keeping doing the work. That's the main thing. The other factor is just time. If I wish that I had like 3 of me, if I could just get like a research team, if I had an admin assistant and a research assistant, and someone who could do like tech, like, editing videos and stuff, or, cause I do everything. I write the scripts, I edit the videos, I do everything. If I could farm that out in a way that were like fair and made sense, then, I could really crank out so much more content, because the time it takes me to edit videos, that's time I'm not researching, and the time I'm researching, that's time I'm not shooting videos, and the time I'm shooting videos, that's time I'm not writing new scripts. And so because there's only one of me, and because I got kids, I got life, I got things I got to do, it means that Esoterica is just, that's going to get the time it gets, and that's all I can get. So that's the biggest hurdle. It's just being one person, having so much time and having so much funding. If I could expand Esoterica into like an actual, kind of outfit that had like a team working on things, then yeah, it could be we could be, I think, an order of magnitude more production, more education, more stuff like that. But no, I think that's the biggest challenge, because I have the languages, I have the ability to do the research, I have access to the books, I have access to almost everything that I would need in terms of concrete stuff that I need to get access to. I can write pretty fast. I can write a 4,000 word Esoterica script in a day. I do that every week. I write a 4,000 word essay basically every week. So it's not, the limitation isn't on me so much, or rather it's on me in a very particular kind of way. But no, I'm very lucky that I get to do what I do. I'm very blessed I get to do what I do. And the biggest hurdles are just, they always are hurdles. It's just time of the day. How many of you are there, and how much funding do you have? Folks may not know this. I don't know if I said this. My office, the room that I work in here, this whole room, I'm about to, next spring, I'm going to gut this whole room. I'll make content of the entire process, but this room was never meant to be a studio. It was never meant to be like a big library like this. It's just jammed to the gills with stuff, and it just needs to be totally overhauled. And so I'm going to gut this whole room and turn it into a functioning studio, a functioning actual like research room, where I can have stacks, and I can have lots of more access to books, and I can more rationally organize books. I can have bookshelves that aren't like crappy bookshelves from Walmart that are like sagging under the weight of all these books. So I'm going to really redo all this, and so that it's functional. So I'm not like tripping over cords and things like that. So little stuff like that, well, not little, big stuff like that, but that's kind of the stuff in the pipeline. If I understand correctly, that Sim Sum was made possible by an inherent split in Ein Sof that allowed for the pleasure to take place. I think that if I'm understanding Sarug correctly, and I think I understand Cordovero, is that the that the shashua, the delight, the divine delight it's always already. That insofar as Ein Sof exists, it is in the process of that delight. In that delighting, right, is at first sort of a collapsed delight, such that the subject and object of the delighting are united in sort of a primal unity. But somehow the process of delighting, of Shashua, creates a subject object distinction, and that distinction, for Cordovero and for Sarug, is what ultimately throws down Da'at, and Da'at then splits into Chokhmah and Binah. So I think that's the process, is that that there's a primitive moment or primitive period, I suppose. And again, the language here is always kevyakol, it's always like as if. But that primitive delighting is under a radical unity, and then that the process, the shashua, the process of delighting, creates a disjunction, and then that disjunction allows for the emanation of Tzimtzum, and then the emanation of Da'at, which splits into Chokhmah and Binah. Think that's the mechanism. What are your thoughts on the connection between Kabbalah, German idealism, and its successors? I think it's well attested that some version of Kabbalah, and this is Glenn Alexander McGee's point that he's made beautifully, that there is a connection of Hermeticism, Kabbalah, and all of that wrapped up in German idealism via Hegel and so definitely Schelling and stuff like that. So yeah, the answer is definitely it's there. Andrew Weeks has written about this. If you take a look at Andrew Weeks's work, he's written about sort of the intersection of German idealism and these sort of occulty trains of thought. Again, Glenn Alexander McGee's book on Hegel and the Hermetic tradition really traces this out in a really fantastic way. He's written me some really fantastic emails behind the scenes that I want to get back to. So that'd be the direction. But yeah, my thoughts on the connection is that it is there. I think where McGee and I maybe differ is how strong the connection is, how strong the influence is. I think McGee sees it a lot stronger than I do, but I mean, he's also the expert on it. So I would, I have my opinion, but my opinion is not nearly as educated as his, and so I would encourage people to defer to his opinion. Thank you, JJS, digging the crowns. Thanks for the super chat. Hey there, to Liverpool, listening from Amsterdam. Good for you. Thank you. Yeah, go out and have a Jenever for me. You can go to my favorite. If you're in Amsterdam, you can go to my favorite cafe, which is Smale. It's over there it's on the Prinsengracht. Prinsengracht, it's like across from 223 Prinsengracht is Cafe Smale. And I basically wrote my entire master's thesis at that cafe. It is my favorite cafe in all of Holland. So if you're in Amsterdam, go jump past Cafe Smale and have a Jenever. All right. Yes, I have heard of Stan Tenen and the Meru Foundation, and it's that his Hebrew stuff is complete nonsense. It's total nonsense. Just like it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting stuff that people make up, but it has no connection to actual Hebrew reality. Whatever have Christopher Warnock on the channel? It's funny. I was actually reading Warnock and Greer's translation of Thabit Ibn Qura's book on talismans. I'm reading both the new critical edition put out by Gideon Bohak, and also reading their edition, because I try to read both if there is to, and because I'm making an episode not this week. The next week will be a new episode on the Demiurge, which I know people have been asking about. So yes, the next week's episode will be on the Demiurge, part 2 of the Demiurge series. And then after that, I'm going to come back and do an episode on Thabit Ibn Qura and some other texts, like the ones in Picatrix and stuff like that, on talisman creation. But yeah, I would have Warnock on the channel. I know that I think he has a bit of a kind of a beef with academics. I'm not sure exactly what the nature of that is. I've seen a couple of his things where he seems to have a disdain for academics. So, I mean, I'm not sure if you want to even be on the channel, because considering it's an academic channel. But no, I think that Warnock and Greer are real titans in the field, and I would certainly be happy to have them on. Been talking to Greer. I got to meet him at the Esotericon. Super kind guy. And I'm looking over his translation of the magical aphorisms of John Dee. John Dee's first work, which Greer is working on a translation of, and so far it looks fantastic. It's just really good stuff. I know. Were there ever beliefs about the magical power or properties of metal, and similar to how gemstones are viewed to have magical power? Yeah. I mean, definitely that Albertus Magnus, in the same text that he writes about on gems, he'll talk about the curative properties of metals, specifically silver and gold. In fact, it's interesting. One of the things that Nicholas Emmerich talks about in his book Against the Alchemists is how you can test alchemical metals. And one of the ways you can test alchemical metals is whether or not they have those kinds of quasi-magical properties. For instance, the curative property of gold, which is still an idea. People still wear like copper bracelets, and people take, silver tabs that can even turn your skin blue if you eat too much silver, consume too much silver. But yeah, the idea that that metals definitely had magical properties, occult properties, we could better say. I think that was an idea definitely you see in Albertus Magnus and many other medieval thinkers. Oh no. In my opinion, is it Simpson Capusto or Sholo Capusto? I guess it depends on what you mean by Capusto, because the Gra means one thing by it, and the Chasina means something else by it. I'm not going to answer because I don't believe it seems to remember. I guess what I'm saying, what I'll say is this. I take the Ari at his word, and when the Ari says that that Simsum is kevyakol, that is to say, it is a likely story. It is as it were. When he disclaims himself, and Kabbalists always talk that way. That's not unique to him, but he talks that way a lot. It's this kevyakol, this kevyakol. It's like, I think we should take their disclaimers seriously. So when the Kabbalists say this is a something like this happened, then we shouldn't take them literally when they say something like this happened. And I take seriously that the Ari, he's trying to be careful, but I think what he's doing is saying, look, if Hashem is just infinite light, if Hashem is just Ein Sof, and if this reality is in some sense distinct, not fundamentally different, not separate, not sort of like creatio ex nihil, like, sort of God's over here and then the world of the Olam is over there, not like that. But if there is some distinction between this world of Malchut and the world of Ein Sof, then there has to be some place where Ein Sof wasn't. And how could there be a place where Ein Sof wasn't? Again, give you hope, whatever place and time means in this situation. So I think what the Ari is doing, he's saying, well, logically, something like that had to have happened. If there is Ein Sof and if there is not Ein Sof, then there must have been something that the divine did to create space for the emanations, for the Shefa. And Simsum is just as good a story as any other story. But I don't take it, or rather, I do take it that the Ari is saying we should not take it literally, because we can't know it happened. Because we can't know that's what happened. And I think that's what he's saying. He's making a philosophical point, an epistemological point. And so it can't be Simsum Capusto in a strict sense, because if it's literally that, how will we even know that? How would you even know it was literally that if we can't even know anything prior to the existence of Adam Kadmon? So I think that's the point. So it's not a question of, is it, for me, Simsum Capusto or Shalok Capusto or whatever. To me, it's just like the Ari is telling us that there's a disclaimer about his concept of Simsum, and we ignore his disclaimer, and we just teach it as if Simsum just happened, literally. Like we just tell, like that's the story. There was Ein Sof, and then God like sucked in part of God's infinite gut, and then into the infinite gut sucking, God tightened the belt, and into that gap there flowed the Sphirot, or whatever, the Adam Kadmon. And I think that what he's saying is, we don't know that. I don't know that. No one can know that. But something like that must have happened. And I think that's the point of that. And I think that's why the whole business of Simsum Kavushto matters, because it's like, if you say it literally happened, you're saying that you know something that no one can know. And there's like, it's chutzpahdik. It's just like extreme metaphysical chutzpahdik. So maybe that's the point. I think that's part of the point, at least. What is my opinion of the recent translation of Agrippa by Eric Perdue? I'm enthusiastically for it. It's a great translation. Get it. Eric's done a fantastic job. Do you think that Merkava and Hechelot led to Kabbalah? Is there a good book that describes this? Hechelot literature and Hechelot literature definitely led to Kabbalah in the sense that there's Hechelot literature in the Zohar. There you go. So yeah, I think that Hechelot literature did lead in some sense to the Kabbalah, but the Kabbalah is a distinct form of mysticism, a very distinct form of mysticism. And same as the Sefer Yetzirah is a distinct form of Jewish mysticism. That's not the speculative kind of Kabbalah of the Zohar, nor is it the phenomenological. If that distinction matters, maybe it doesn't. But yes, they definitely fed into each other. One could say they fed into each other, but not in some mechanical way. There were definitely schools of theosophical speculativism in Provence and northern Spain that coalesced. But the core, it became Kabbalah in the sense of the Sefer Bahir and the Sefer Zohar and other texts in that circle. But I think without the Hechelot literature, they would have looked quite different. But they're all feeding into each other. They're all feeding into each other. I've never seen Full Metal Alchemist. I've never seen any Full Metal Alchemist. I know it's just a thing that I've just never seen, but I always hear the good stuff about it. But I've not seen it. I've not seen it. Do you agree that the meaning lesson of life is to spiritually evolve regardless of the path you take? I have no idea. No idea. Not for me to give advice about the meaning of life. No idea. Ashley, is there anything that suggests that Agrippa was internally having a hard time being Catholic, but kind of not Catholic? I think he had a complicated relationship with the Catholic Church. And again, that shouldn't surprise us, because it was just the one church, right? And the church was going through a lot of tectonic shifts. Protestantism was on the rise. But I think that fundamentally Agrippa bought into the role of the church as an important mediator of salvific grace via the sacraments. And so insofar as that's true, and I think Agrippa held on to that, I think that he had to hold on to the church. I think he had real criticisms of the church, especially of the priesthood, and the corruption of the church, and the fact that the church has gotten away from its ultimate, its fundamental mission. But there's no evidence that, to my knowledge, that Agrippa ever thought to break from the church or join the Proto-Protestants. And he's certainly floating in Proto-Protestant territory, but there's no evidence he ever attempted to leave. And he was buried in a Dominican church. The same people that hounded him his whole life. So I don't think there's any reason to believe that he was headed toward a divorce with the church. But also he died early. He published the DOP in 1533 and died in 1535. The best thing you can do if you're going to publish a really controversial book in the 1530s is to die quickly. It saves you the trouble of being killed by the Inquisition. And so it could be the case that, had he lived a little longer or a bit longer, maybe the Dominicans would have really given him a tough time of it. But I don't know. But I don't think he ever was. There's no evidence to me he was anything other than a good Catholic, but certainly a heterodox Catholic, at least from the side of things that I've seen. Hey man, thank you so much. It's a very generous super chat. I really appreciate that. I'm really glad you've been enjoying the Agrippa lectures, and yeah, the Eric Purdue translation is really, really good. It's fantastic. You know, folks, I don't know if folks know this. You know, I have a copy of this is my copy of the 1533. This is formerly in the possession of Reed Moon. If folks know Reed Moon, it's a fantastic book collector. But this is my copy of. I don't know if you can see. It's probably going to be all washed out from the light. But this is my copy of the original 1533, Cornelius Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy. Like I said previously, in the collection of Reed Moon. But yeah, so this is my copy. I don't know. Like I said, it's all washed out in the light. Sorry, but to give you a sense of how big it is, I don't know. Here's, if you look at it, this is a copy of Eric's. So get some sense of like the relative size of these old books. So this is volume 3, book 3 of in Eric's translation. I had him on, folks. I had Eric on right when the translation dropped, and it was a great conversation. Maybe I'll see if he can come on and for the lecture series and do some chatting about some of the astrological stuff that's important in the 3 books, because he's definitely more skilled in that than others, than me. All right, let's see. How do you feel about the widespread appropriation and commercialization of non-Western traditions being repackaged as ancient wisdom, absent their historical context? I don't know. It's like mixed spirituality. It's toxic. It's poison. I mean, I think once you remove a wisdom tradition from its sapiential context and its sapiential community that produced it, you're probably going to end up with poison. So I've just never seen a situation where I know of in history where, like I said, a sapiential technology, whether it's a wisdom tradition or a spiritual tradition, is sort of amputated and then moved into a different context without the actual sapiential tradition and the sapiential community that produced it to act as sort of the guardrails for it. It almost always leads to intellectual toxicity, spiritual poison. So I'm extremely skeptical of that. Very skeptical. Other than the video on the Emerald Tablet, it's a good place to study Hermeticism. I have episodes on Hermeticism. Dana Trail has some. Philip at Let's Talk Religion has episodes on Hermeticism. We all have long reading lists that you can get from there. I will also say that the Hermeticism subreddit on Reddit is fantastic. Sam Block and the folks that hang out there are just some of they're very wise. They don't suffer fools, but they're incredibly wise people. And the Hermeticism subreddit is I think pretty high quality. So I would check it out. But yeah, we've myself, Dana Trail, the Modern Hermeticist, and Philip have all done episodes on Hermeticism. And so those are all good leaping off points to jump into that material. I have, Fred. I have esoteric links related to the work of Leibniz. Yeah. What's their name? There's a book called Leibniz and the Kabbalah. I can't believe I'm spacing on it. Alison Kudert, is that am I thinking of that correctly? Yes. Yeah, Alison Kudert has a whole book called Leibniz and the Kabbalah. It's a bit of a difficult book to find, but it's fantastic. So there you go. A direct connection at some level between Leibniz and the Kabbalah. Gnosticism, something founded in Egypt area because they like Jesus, but not Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Kind of. I'll talk about that a little bit more this week when I do the next episode on the on the demiurge, the new episode on the demiurge. And the spirit of Spinoza's landlord. That's a great way of starting a thing. Yeah, I have not read Carlyle's book, so I can't comment on it. So yeah, I can't comment on it, but I need to put it on the shelf. I need to put it on in the reading list. Yeah, I mean, I think that what caught Joachim Fiore, he only mentions Joachim Fiore a couple times. I think that it has everything to do with the whole age of the spirit stuff. The really big thing about Joachim Fiore's prediction about the sort of transitions from moments to history is that in the period of the spirit, there would be a new intimacy between God and man. And that new intimacy between God and man would allow man miraculous powers. And that would, of course, help us to fight the Antichrist, because the Antichrist. I think a part of Agrippa's interest in that whole business has to do with the fact that he thinks they are entering into that age where God and man are becoming reconciled, and they're going to become reconciled through magic. And I think that Agrippa believed, like many people believed, that they had gone, and this is true of the spiritual Franciscans all the way back in the 14th century, that they had transitioned into the period of the spirit, and that now there will be new kinds of powers unlocked for man. And I think that's part of the reason why Agrippa is so taken with Joachim of Fiore. I think that's the thing. It's not about the apocalyptic end of the world stuff, but it's about these kind of new powers that are going to be unlocked in the period of the spirit. And I think that's something that Agrippa is interested in, because I think he believes he's basically writing the book on it. So that'd be my guess. All right. Yeah, whatever tackles Saint Bonaventura. Yes, I will definitely be getting to Bonaventura at some point. Although honestly, Bonaventure has just been covered by other channels so well, and there's a lot of Catholics out there that cover Bonaventure. I'm much more interested in covering more esoteric Catholic mystics, especially women. I'm much more interested in covering the mystical ladies. So I'm going to do an episode on Marguerite Perret to sort of wrap up this this sort of group, the Mechtild and Angela Foligno and stuff. And then I want to turn to some more obscure women, Gertrude of Helfta and Beatrice of Nazareth and those kind of folks, because Bonaventura and I don't know. I was going to cover Hildegard as well, even though I think Hildegard is quite well covered. But who else? Like, there's a bunch of other people I want to cover. That are more obscure, and I think that don't get their time they don't get their days in the sun, and Bonaventure is one of them. I think he gets a lot of coverage. So yeah, I definitely want to get to more obscure mystics in that tradition. The Black Death. Yes, people believed a ton of things was causing it. People believed it was Jews poisoning wells. People believed that it was an astrological conjunction that would pass relatively briefly. That's what they believed. The doctors of Paris believed that it was an astrological conjunction, and no, they didn't evacuate Paris. They were planning on evacuating Paris, basically to stop, stem the flow of the death. And the astrologers basically told them it was just a brief conjuncture, and it was going to pass. The Black Death entered in 1348 and didn't leave and it really never left. But it was most horrendous until about 1351, 1352. So there were tons of theories as to about exactly what was causing the Black Death. But it was a huge rupture in medieval medicine, because the going medical theories of the time didn't predict a new illness. In fact, new illnesses didn't make any sense with Galenic medicine. And the arrival of some new radical illness really terrified the medical establishment, and ultimately led to some breakdowns and those kinds of things. And that set the stage, of course, for people like Agrippa, or not Agrippa, but people like Paracelsus. Thank you, Awareness Daily, for the super sticker. I appreciate that. What is the Platonic order of reading Plato? If you give me a minute, I can tell you. I have it written down here somewhere. Where'd it go? Sorry, I gotta go find it. Where'd it go? I'm sorry, I have to find it later, but it starts with the first Alcibiades, which again, no one reads now. But it begins with Alcibiades 1, and then it followed from there. Let me see if I can just find it really fast. Of course, I'm not going to be able to find it fast. Yeah, it goes like this. This is from Iamblichus, folks. Alcibiades, followed by the Gorgias, and then followed by the Phaedo, and then Cratylus, Theaetetus, and then the four dialogues: Statesman, Phaedrus, Symposium, and then Philebus, and then finally Timaeus and Parmenides. That's the order. That's the order that you read them in, and I'll do that one more time. Alcibiades, followed by Gorgias and Phaedo, and then Cratylus, Theaetetus, Cratylus, Theaetetus, and then Sophist, Statesman, Symposium, Philebus, and finally Timaeus and Parmenides. Notice the Republic's missing. Notice that the Republic is missing. But that's the order that traditionally Iamblichus, the Neoplatonic schools, that's the way that they did it. Is English gematria real? I'm sure it's as real as Hebrew gematria. I mean, it just so happens that that in Hebrew and in Greek, letters and numbers do double duty. They don't do that in English. So is gematria, English gematria real? I'm sure it's just as real as Hebrew gematria. Just as real as any other. Not Queen. Thank you so much for the super sticker. I appreciate that. Appreciate that. Thank you. Am I ever going to make an element on Shlomo Melech? Maybe. I mean, I've kind of made a bunch of videos about Shlomo Melech, King Solomon, folks. Yeah, I mean, just about the demon stuff, but I don't think I'll make an entire episode just about King Solomon, period. I'll probably make episodes about Solomon's rings or other kinds of elements that are particular about, King Solomon and those kinds of things. Do you think that the differences between the Bruce Codex and the Nag Hammadi library versions of Pistis Sophia are meaningful? No, because there are not. Pistis Sophia does not occur in the Nag Hammadi library. It occurs only in the and also doesn't occur in the Bruce Codex. It occurs in the Askew Codex. So no, the text of the Askew Codex and the text of the Bruce Codex do not occur in Nag Hammadi. They are unique. They only occur in those codices. So there are no differences between them because there are Pistis Sophia, the books of you, and the untitled text, the untitled text in the Bruce Codex don't occur in the Nag Hammadi library at all. Matt H, thank you for the super sticker. Right. Do you think Crowley had any depth of knowledge about Kabbalah? No. No. Crowley couldn't read Hebrew. Crowley couldn't read Aramaic. Crowley basically plagiarized 777 from Alan Bennett. And maybe what he didn't know, he maybe got from Kabbalah Denudata. But no, I don't think Crowley had any... I don't see any evidence of Crowley having a deep understanding of Kabbalah whatsoever. I think he had I think his understanding of yoga was far deeper than his understanding of Kabbalah. And frankly, Crowley was an anti-Semite. I mean, it's just like he just says constantly disparaging things about Jews. So I think that I think not only but yeah, not only did he not know much about Kabbalah, and a lot of the stuff in 777 is bad. A lot of the gematria is just a mess, and words are misspelled in Hebrew. It's pretty embarrassing. But yeah, I think that Crowley did not know much about Kabbalah. So I'm making videos about reformed attitudes toward esotericism, like Calvinism. As I guess maybe what you're thinking of, sort of like the Calvinistic world. Yeah, I don't know much about that world. Can't imagine they had much positive to say about esotericism in general, but yeah, maybe. Um, Consider doing an episode on the homunculus. Yeah, I think the homunculus deserves an episode. Um, um, yep, yep. Yeah, both in Paracelsus, but also sort of the homuncular theory of pregnancy that you find in Aristotle and stuff. Any thoughts on Menachem Nahum and Chernobyl? I don't have a lot of thoughts. I don't know. I'm not really an expert in Chassidut, the Chassidic world and the Chassidic traditions. Zevi over at Seekers of Unity would be much more your guy for that. But no, I don't know much about him. Esoteric places to visit in Prague. You could probably get down with some Edward Kelly stuff. I think that's either in Prague or the Czech Republic. Of course, there's the Golem stuff, but that's all made up. The Golem of Prague stuff is made up in the 19th century. The Maharal of Prague never made a Golem. I think there's also in Prague a couple of alchemical museums. I think that like some alchemy labs that have been recreated in the city. I don't know how realistic those are. I think they said that it was like a flood or something, and they found it, and I don't know. I'm not sure how much I believe that, but I know of at least that, of at least those things. Mind. Let's see. What are some solutions for the apparent contradiction between academic study and religious studies, like Pardes versus the author? Definitely didn't mean that. Arising to be God. I don't see the need to make solutions for that. I think that I don't see the need to fix problems that aren't really problems. I think the data is the data, and the task of an academic is to present the data as clearly as possible. And when the data contradicts your faith, well, that's why it's called faith. You need to think through what's going on in your faith, or you need to think through like how your historiography interacts with it. You need to think through your relationship to mythology and what mythology means to you. But what you cannot do with intellectual integrity is look at the data and say, oh, I don't like that, and just believe something else. If you're going to do that, then you might as well you can't be a scholar. You got to be something else. No amount of apologetic jumping through mental hoops and the mental gymnastics that go into most of the apologetics that I've seen. Yeah, to me, it's intellectually dishonest, and I'm not going to do it. So I just, whatever the date is, the date is. You'd mentioned in a previous video that Plato's Timaeus was the origin of the demiurge. Would you believe that video was in fact the first video about the demiurge? So, yep, that's basically the first place where we get kind of a craftsperson demiurge characters in Plato's Timaeus. Do you still research on Marxism and stuff like that? No, I haven't read any new Marxism literature in a long time. It's tiresome, frankly. But no, I haven't read any of that literature in a long, long time. Thank you, Sparky, is that the Hypnotoad? But yes, thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate that. You've mentioned that the Christian Trinity is the perfect encapsulation of Greco-Roman philosophy. Would you ever consider making an episode explaining how that is? Probably not, just because it's really not that esoteric. I just like, if you read, Origen and Athanasius and Augustine, read out Augustine's book on the Trinity. you just can't not see basically every thread of Greek philosophy coming in to make that work, whether it's Platonism or Stoicism or whatever. It's all coming together to make the Trinity work. And I think it's just ipso facto. I don't think I'm making a terribly controversial or even interesting point. It's just the Trinity requires all that to get off the ground. And to me, it's not so much an esoteric point. I think it's just, I don't know. I guess I don't consider it to be that interesting. But I think that what is interesting about it is often Christians don't appreciate that. They sort of see the Trinity as sort of fallen out of the sky. And I think that people who appreciate Greek philosophy don't appreciate the philosophical rigor that goes into making the Trinity work. It's seeing past each other. This is a thing that often I see happening, where groups of scholars see past each other. And for me on the outside, like, I don't think the Trinity is true. I think it's ingenious nonsense. It's ingenious, but it's still nothing I believe in. But that doesn't mean that it's not ingenious, and it doesn't mean that it's also I can't appreciate it for what it is. And what it is one of the most interesting constructs of sort of terminal classic Greek and Roman philosophy. But again, I don't think I'm saying anything especially interesting when I say that. I just think it's the kind of thing that Christian theologians can't say that because they can't see it as a construction. They have to see it as like always there. And they're just sort of putting words to it or something. And I think that philosophically inclined people think they're just throwing philosophy in the kitchen sink at a theological problem to make it work. And, philosophers just don't care about the Trinity. For them, it's just a post hoc justification for some theological stuff that they want to justify. And philosophers hate theology. And to me, both of those seems just like wrongheaded. They seem profoundly wrongheaded to me. So, but yeah, I don't think I'm saying anything terribly. I might say more about that, but I'm not saying anything terribly interesting. Any updates on the Egypt trip? Yes, I do have some updates. We're in the very last stages of getting everything put together. I just went through the itinerary with the company on Friday. So we have the itinerary. I can't say anything about it yet. We're still getting the numbers together, but I'm hoping that by next week and maybe the week after that, we'll have the first like it'll be live and people can start signing up. So we're gonna have to meet a quota of how many people can go. Probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 people we'll have to go. But I do think that we'll be live with it. You will be able to sign up to go in August. That has to happen. So yes, that is definitely coming down the pike. Yep. All right. The Karen Armstrong book, I haven't read it. So yeah, I haven't read it in a long time. Yeah, I haven't read it in a long time, so I can't give a good opinion about it. But yep. Do Jesuits do gematria? And in English, if they do, I have no idea. I don't know what Jesuits do aside from rock really awesome cassocks. Rocking cassocks. But yeah, I don't know that Jesuits do gematria. My gut tells me no. I think they're kind of like too heady for that. I always think of them as being a little bit too cerebral to be doing numerical mysticism and stuff like that. Any recommendations on works related to the ways of the Sadakim? This sounds like more Hasidut stuff. I don't know of anything specifically. This is a great question for Zevi. Zevi would definitely know more about sort of like things that the Sadikim are just righteous people, saints, basically. There's a custom, I think, in the Hasidic world where one imitates these saints, and you do the kinds of things that they did. And the idea is that if they did it, they had mystical reasons for doing it, and those reasons can be they can unlock stuff for anybody. But I think that's more of a Hasidic thing. But I don't know anything. I don't know much about that. Good question for Zevi. Daniel Feldman, yeah, I'm glad that you really like the Wisdom of the Zohar. It's a great that's a great text. It's a great collection. You can see it right over my shoulder, actually. right there, Tishbe, the Wisdom of the Zohar. It's a great little collection. Much more affordable than the Danny Matt, the 12-volume Danny Matt one. Um, but yeah. Have you ever considered making a video on how alchemy is often portrayed in modern culture? No. That'd be like a debunking video, and I don't do debunking videos. I'd rather just keep, they're always unpopular and people hate them, but I'm just going to keep doing alchemy videos that just show alchemy in history over and over and over and over again. And people can keep telling me that, that I don't understand alchemy, and I've never read alchemy because I don't really understand the real spiritual alchemy that, was made up in the 19th century. No, I mean, I'm not going to do any sort of modern alchemical stuff. I might eventually do an episode on Jung and Adler, or rather Jung and Atwood. I'll probably eventually get to them, but no, I'm not going to do an episode on sort of contemporary alchemy stuff. It'd be a good thing for maybe Dr. Puka to do. She goes better with the modern stuff. Did Agrippa consume psychotropic substances? I mean, wine. But as far as that, I don't know there's no evidence of anything other than that. There's no evidence other than that. What's your position on panentheism? It is interesting. Bulgar 11. It's a fantastic name. I mean, I'm not a theist, so I don't think there is a the to be in the pan. So no, I'm not team pro panentheism. But it's certainly a clever position. It's certainly a clever position. Are you familiar with the Yesod Olam of Esquire Abraham? This is the one that has Ars Notoria in it. Is that right? Is that the there's like a chunk of Ars Notoria in the Yesod Olam? I think that's, if I remember correctly. I know of it. I know that there's an article out about it. But I haven't had time to read the article, but I don't have much of a thought about it aside from that. It's interesting that there's Ars Notoria translated into Hebrew. But a lot of stuff got translated into Hebrews. Almadel's translated into Hebrew. But I know it is interesting. But unless there's something especially different in the Hebrew translation, then it's just a Hebrew translation of the Ars Notoria, and I've covered the Ars Notoria, so I don't think there would be any real reason to cover it unless there's something uniquely different about the translation. They infuse Kabbalah or something into it, but from my understanding, it's just it's just a translation of it with some of the notai in Hebrew, but that's as far as I know. But yeah. All right. Do you have a discussion regarding pre-biblical, pre-patriarchal Judaism? Do you agree with anthro-sociology that Judaism has all the markers of matriarchal social democracy? No, I don't think that's true. I mean, I think that that there were certain kinds of women in Israel, early Israelite society, late Bronze, early Iron, that were, had prophetic abilities, and they were part of these sort of war band prophets, and and some of them, they had some rather unique positions in society, but I don't think there's any evidence of Israelite society being matriarchal. In fact, it's brutally patriarchal. So no, I don't. I think it's an interesting idea, but I don't think there's any real evidence of that. Planning on making a video on the Pymander? I kind of did. Are you a beer or wine person? I used to be a beer person, but now I'm more of a wine person. But yeah, I've made an episode on the Corpus Hermeticum, so of which the Pymander is the first of the Corpus Hermeticum. Yeah, thanks. I'm glad it was great talking to on the Varn vlog. If you go to Wild Hair and write that history of the class struggle in Western esotericism, you'll make at least a dozen people very happy. Yeah, I'll make a dozen people very happy. It will take me 10 years to write it. Yeah, I'm never going to do that. It's not worth the time. I mean, it's the kind of thing I'd love to talk about more in live streams and stuff, but uh, but no, I think that there are interesting things to be written about. You know, there's those like working class stories of like Paracelsus and thinking about Paracelsus as you know, again, sort of a class and Western esotericism from the point of view of class struggle is an interesting thing. I could write, yeah, it's more the kind of thing I would write episodes about, but never really write a book about. But I appreciate the super chat. And that was fun. That was a fun super chat. Yeah, my lord. My lord is like if absinthe threw up. Yeah, I mean, it tastes terrible. I mean, it's you know, it's just, to me it tastes terrible. You know, wormwood, and again, the Chicago people are going to kill me, but I just feel like wormwood needs to be distilled. Otherwise, it's just so incredibly bitter. I actually, frankly, don't even get the whole craze. There's this huge craze now with all these people, just like sipping on all these herbal aperitifs that all to me taste like terrible. And yeah, I don't know, I don't get it, but that is a phase that people are going through now. um yeah, hipster people drinking wormwood. Not for me, not for me. um all right. Will I ever cover the Mandean Sabians? Maybe. The fact that they're still an extant religious group kind of, um I'm not sure I want to cover them because they're actually still out there, thank God. And so in some ways, covering them, I cover history, folks, and covering the Mandeans doesn't seem right because they're not history. They're alive, and they're present, and they're in the world, and they've survived horrific persecution. Thank God they're around. But so studying them historically doesn't seem correct to me. And so in some ways, I don't know that I'll get to the Sabians or the Mandeans, just because they're not history. They're very much alive, thank God, despite the many attempts to killing them. All right. From an academic perspective, what cultural source was the Sagillium Dei? I guess it's the Sagillium Dei Emet. I guess you're thinking about the one from John Dee. It was from the Liber Iuratus. Yeah, it's from the Liber Iuratus. So if you want to see where, because Dee had two copies of the Liber Iuratus in his library, at least two. He had the Ganel and he had another one, and he was trying to choose between both of them, and the angels basically said, "Hey, we're going to give you a totally different one." But they're both the one that Dee ultimately got was based on um, was based on the uh, based on the Liber Iuratus one. So that's where it comes from. But yeah, it's totally Christian, totally Christian. All right. I'm just looking for some other questions here at the end, folks. What started me on the journey to esoteric travels? Just weird shows like Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World and like Evil Dead, and I was like, that stuff is super weird and cool, and I want to study that stuff, and so I did. Any opinions on Daniel Schmattenberger and what he calls the meta crisis? I don't know. I've never heard of that person, so I don't know what the meta crisis is. But it is good that it's meta. Anything you can do, I can do meta. But yeah, I've never heard of this. Sorry, Carlos. I don't know anything about that. As a Hebrew speaker, I am not a Hebrew speaker. Just FYI, I do not speak modern Hebrew. As a Hebrew speaker, how could you describe your comprehension of Phoenician and Canaanite languages intuitively? Could you use analogies to English? I mean, I read biblical Hebrew and Aramaic, and so when Canaanite or Phoenician or whatever, Ammonite or whatever, Moabite, when those languages are put into Hebrew letters, I mean, they read like Hebrew. I mean, Moabite has slightly different things, right? It has I think it's the feminine gender marker is slightly different in the plural, I think. So you can definitely tell that they're not Hebrew, but you can kind of read, a Moabite inscription if you read biblical Hebrew. The languages are not that different. I mean, they're probably as different as like Spanish and Catalan. Maybe closer than that even. I'm trying to think of Phoenician and Hebrew. Yeah, like maybe like Spanish and Catalan, something like that. That would be that close. You can tell it's a different language, but it's not so different. Aramaic and Hebrew are probably as different from each other as Spanish and Portuguese, maybe a little closer than that. It's hard. It's so hard to say. But yeah, if you read biblical Hebrew, you can, if you see an inscription of Moabite, you can make most of it out. Or, Phoenician, you can make a lot of it out. A lot of the words are cognate, and even if you don't understand something, the verb grammar may be different. The verb grammar between Aramaic and Hebrew is pretty different, but, you can kind of get a sense. And there's definitely, verbal forms that don't occur in Hebrew that occur in Aramaic and vice versa or something. But the nouns, definitely, I mean, they're almost all cognate. They're very closely cognate. Now the vocalization is probably different, but again, if you're reading it just to understand it and not vocalize it, then you're usually in pretty good shape. All right, I'm scrolling down and getting a couple more. Yeah, of course. Always happy to take folks' questions. Yeah, I appreciate the super chat. And yeah, I'm always happy to take questions and answer the best I can. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me. It's really great. All right, let me see a couple more. Yeah, I mean the matriarchal lineage thing, that's late, right? That didn't begin until the rabbis, and that's mostly just a function of the fact that, well, frankly, sexual assault was used as a weapon of war, and so the rabbis just argued that there's no way to know who the father is, but you can always know who the mother is, and so they established one's Judaism goes through one's matriarchal lineage. But everything else goes through the patriarchal lineage, your name and your titles and that kind of stuff. And you can see the writers of the New Testament freaking out about this because they try to trace Jesus's lineage to David through his father first, and then they're like, oh crap, like that's not his real dad, because they've developed the virgin birth mythology, and then they try to trace it through Mary, and that doesn't work either because you can't trace lineages through women because men had lots of concubines and stuff, and so it doesn't matter who you're, that does not, that you can't trace stuff that way. But yeah, no, I don't think, when I look at any evidence from Israelite religion, I'm not seeing a matriarchy by any stretch of the imagination. I'm seeing a ferocious patriarchy, one where women had extremely little rights. How long did it take to learn Latin? I'm still learning it. So many years. I'm still learning Latin up to this day. But yeah, I mean, you can learn Latin. You can learn to read good Latin in a couple of years, maybe even less than that. It's 2 semesters. What's your opinion on Dr. Jordan Peterson? If you were interviewed by him, what would you? I would not be interviewed. I don't think I would be interviewed by Dr. Peterson. Nothing. I mean, Dr. Peterson, when he's talking about Jungian psychology and stuff, he knows what he's talking about. He was a clinical psychologist. I mean, the guy knows what he's talking about when it comes to his very particular Jungian clinical experience. I don't doubt any of that. It's not for me to doubt. But I will say that when he crosses over into religion and other stuff, it's pretty embarrassing. It's pretty bad typically. There's not a lot of evidence that Dr. Peterson knows a lot about biblical studies, and it shows. And it's kind of, it's one of these things where like staying in your lane's a good idea for you as much as it is anything else. But no, I don't follow Dr. Peterson's work, and I don't think we would have a lot to talk about, frankly. Okay. Yesterday Alam uses the notai for the 10 Sphirot and has a lot of Neoplatonism. Yeah, that could be cool. Yeah, I haven't looked at the manuscript, so the fact that you say that makes me more interested in it. And so yeah, maybe I'll take a look at it when I get some time. That sounds super fascinating. Do you know if it's published? Because if it occurs in one manuscript in Moscow, then getting hands on it can be pretty challenging. Pretty challenging. Opinions on the Egyptian Book of the Dead. We should not call it the Book of the Dead. We should stop calling it that. We should start calling it the Book of Coming Forth by Day, because that's its actual name. I will cover the Book of Coming Forth by Day at some point in the future. I mean, I'm going to get to the coffin texts and other stuff, but yeah, I want to do a series on pyramid texts, coffin texts, Book Coming Forth by Day, the Book of Breathing, and the Book of the Netherworld, and sort of in that historical trajectory. So the next text up will be the coffin texts, which are just massive. Yes, I am going to revisit this Trithemius idea that Trithemius has a kind of proto-information theory. That's after I finish the episode. When I do an episode on Trithemius, which is at some point. I don't know when I'm going to do that, but I will do that at some point. After the Agrippa class is concluded, are you considering another person to do a deep dive into their life and work? The next class next summer has already been basically agreed to by the patrons. They get to vote, and that class that will happen next summer will be on Merkava mysticism, be on Hechelot Merkava mysticism. So that will be the next big deep dive on the channel. Will be an entire class on Merkava and Hechelot mysticism. So, is there a modern from the last 50 years esoteric spiritual work that is noteworthy? Is there anything to you currently that is advancing esoteric studies? I don't study anything in modernity. I mean, I just don't. There's tons of stuff being written, and many people have great things to say about it. I mean, contemporary esotericism is just thriving. It's a huge amount of literature being produced. I don't really read any of it, but you know, people are having a great time of it, and they're writing apparently really good stuff. But I don't really read. Very rarely am I going to like crack open a book on esotericism that's like from basically the 19th century on. So I just don't know what's going on. Very rarely, pretty much never. I know that there's a lot of really smart people writing a lot of really smart stuff. I know academically what's going on, but in terms of actual emic esoteric texts, I really just don't. I don't really read them. Really don't read them. Yep. Are you gonna do some Hegel stuff? Yes, I will definitely be doing some Hegel stuff. That will definitely be happening. I don't know when, but it will definitely happen. I've never read or listened to anything by Manly P. Hall. Like I said, I don't do anything in the 19th century, and he's like early 20th century. I mean, an extraordinary figure for sure, but I don't do any work on. I've never read Manly P. Hall, and I don't. Yeah. So I can't disrecommend him because I don't know what he wrote, but I've never read Manly P. Hall, and I've never listened to any of his lectures. So yeah, but like I said, I don't work in the 19th. I don't work in 20th century stuff really, so I don't really do too much with it. I mean, wanting to delve into esotericism as an academic study, I would recommend them to take a look at my reading list and see what they're interested in, and then get into the literature. And that's it. In terms of doing esotericism, I don't know that I could give them any advice. I would point them in the direction of people that are doing that kind of stuff. But yeah, I would say that if you want to get into the literature, the only way to get into the literature is to get into the literature. And there's no easy way to do that. It just requires you to do the work, and that work is just like I can show you sort of, if you're interested in Gnosticism, this is it. This is the literature. Like, this is where you need to begin the work of like getting yourself into the conversation. And you begin to do the work of getting yourself into the conversation by reading the literature and seeing where the conversation is, and doing the work to get into it. That's the task, and it is not easy, but it is well worth it. It's well worth it. Visiting Rome, Florence, Naples soon. Is it good esoteric landmarks I should carve out time for? I mean, so many. I mean, you got to go to the Bruno statue in Rome. There's tons of stuff in Naples. Basically all of Florence is sort of Hermetic Florence. I mean, all that stuff was built. So much of that was built in the time period of Ficino. But no specific things. I don't know. I have to think about it. When I've gone to Italy, it's been sort of as a very boring tourist. And now that I've seen those normal, boring touristy places, the Duomo or whatever, now I can go back and see it maybe a more esoteric angle. I mean, I'm planning to do a class in Florence at some point on Hermeticism, on Renaissance Hermeticism, Renaissance Kabbalah. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I do intend on teaching a class in Florence about that material. So look for that. Do I have a recommended reading list to get the most out of the Egypt trip? Yes, I will have there'll be a textbook. There'll be a textbook just for the trip that I'll have a bunch of stuff in. Hopefully we'll be able to get it printed out and bound, and you'll have it before you even leave. And it will be all of the major texts that we'll be discussing during the Egypt trip. So yeah, there will be an Egypt trip textbook. I don't know if that makes you scared or excited or both, but yes, there will be a textbook that will come along with your ticket. Have I tried putting Ugaritic in Hebrew letters? Yeah, Ugaritic also reads a good bit like Hebrew. Most of the time, Ugaritic is printed in Latin letters. It's not printed in Hebrew letters, so you typically see it in Latin letters. But yeah, I mean, the main thing that you don't, when you see Ugaritic, there's a lot less matrones lectiones, like helping letters, basically. And so the spellings are a lot less defective. And so it's a little bit more difficult to read because you don't have so many like helping letters, like Vav and Yud. But yeah, I mean, even, big words. I'm thinking of like a word like moat. I mean, it's really similar to Hebrew. I mean, it's, the Levitan and Lotan, like the cognate rate is super high. Now, that doesn't mean that if you can read Hebrew, you can read Ugaritic, but it means that you're not going to learn to read Ugaritic if you haven't already learned to read Hebrew, probably. I mean, there are grammars of Ugaritic. One just came out recently, but I think that typically you're going to be learning Ugaritic through a Hebrew lens, and that's just true of Aramaic and lots of other Moabite, Ammonite, Phoenician, etc. There's an underguy Aramaic too. You basically, I mean, in many ways, you learn Aramaic. You basically learn Aramaic via Hebrew typically. S. Mill, thank you. Yes, I was published as a. If you could shoot me a link via my website, I would love to see it. I'd love to see it. And again, like I said, all the stuff you're telling me, it sounds fantastic. Yeah, it may be well worth an episode, sort of a follow up episode on Ars Notoria. And also, there's a new edition out, my Matthias Castle of the Ars Notoria, which is quite exciting. So maybe I'll bring him on and talk. That'll be a good excuse to talk about that stuff. The personal opinion of the Kabbalion is that it is a work of mid 20th century New Thought with no connection to historical Hermeticism. And so, as a work of New Thought, it is interesting, I suppose, as New Thought, as much as New Thought is interesting. But as a work of Hermeticism, it really isn't that interesting because it's not a work of Hermeticism, not historical Hermeticism. So, that's basically my opinion of the Kabbalion. I don't hate on it because I don't have any reason to hate on it. Some people really dislike it, but I don't have any reason. I don't have any particular beef with it. Like I said, I don't think New Thought is terribly interesting, but I think the pretension that it is a Hermetic text is tenuous and maybe even misleading. Not misleading, but I think it actually is misleading. What is a practical way to use esoteric knowledge for growing a business and dealing with clients? I have no idea. No idea. I think the kind of person that would give you this kind of advice would be a person called a coach. And I don't know. Anytime I hear a thing about vibrations and coaches, I run the other way. So I don't know. I think you just use exoteric knowledge for growing a business, like compound interest. Moral Newton, yeah. Yeah, the all-pervasive spirit. You're right, he does. Yeah, and Newton had a really complicated relationship with a bunch of with a bunch of the sort of stuff he was coming. Gravity, for instance, really troubled him as a thing. Um, yeah, I do plan to do some more work on Newton. I want to do something on his. Newton wrote a whole book on the temple that no one talks about. That he like wanted to like he wrote a book on how to basically rebuild the third temple, and so I want to do an episode on Newton and the temple, and more Newton alchemy stuff too. But I'm really interested in Newton's somewhat peculiar relationship to the temple. Um, so um, so I'm gonna do that as well. Um, yeah, and Happy Gilmore writes about the wrestling of the Holy Spirit. Yeah, Newton was an Arian, not an Arian in uh, the boring Nazi sense of the word, but an Arian in the sense of Arius. He believed that Jesus was not co-eternal with God and was created, and he kept very much kept that to himself because that was absolutely not a thing you're supposed to believe. But yeah, but he wasn't. He was an Arian of a certain kind, so that's kind of interesting. Newton was an interesting dude in a lot of ways. All right, folks. Well, I'm going to jump off. It's been about an hour and a half, and I'm going to jump off and get ready for Shabbat. And we're having a bunch of people over, and it's going to be we have some friends of ours are going out of town for a year, so we're having a bunch of people over. So it's going to be a big hullabaloo. So I need to go downstairs and be helping with getting everything ready and childcare and all that. But that's all to say. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me. Thanks for your amazing, thoughtful questions. And all of the super stream, the super thanks and stuff like that. I really appreciate all of that. And yeah, just just being able to hang out with everybody and do this kind of work is just fantastic. And yeah, I'll see folks. Some folks Sunday, patrons Sunday for the next Agrippa class, and then that should be out on Tuesday, and then next week we'll be turning to the episode 2 in our series on the demiurge. So be looking for that, and also if you're interested in Kabbalah, make sure to check out the episode today about Kabbalah. But otherwise than that, folks, hope you have a great weekend, and I really appreciate all of your comments and all of your support. And until next week, I'll see folks next week, and you guys take it easy, take care of yourselves, and have a great weekend.